Welcome to our October monthly check-in, and get my slides to advance here. I'm on the wrong screen. There we go. There we go. So as always, our community agreements, we are going to stay engaged, trust in the good intentions of others, and feel free to speak your truth. Expect some discomfort if we don't always agree with what's being said, but bring your identity. Don't be afraid to say what you think, and accept that we might not always have closure, but we'll work on it. And I found a new quote for this month. It shouldn't matter how slowly a child learns, as long as we encourage them not to stop. That one's from Robert John Meehan. Very good quote. And as always, our Missouri commitments to English learner success. So these come from our EL Blueprint for EL Success on the DESE website. And we're going to continue a little bit with unpacking our WIDA ELD standards. So those highlighted areas are still the same, but we're adding a little bit today to go with our special speakers, which will be from the Missouri Writing Projects Network. And they're going to talk to us a little bit about on-demand writing assessments. And then we'll have some Q&A with them. And then we're going to look at for a little bit, very briefly, at the key language uses, which is the section 2 of our unpacking of the standards. So I'm going to turn it over at this time and stop sharing my screen and let the Missouri Writing Project Network take over.
Thank you so much, Cami. We're really excited to be here. I'm Katie Klein, and we have some other partners with us here on the call. But if you're not familiar with the Missouri Writing Projects Network, feel free to ask a question in the chat, and we'll be happy to point you to websites and provide information for you. But what we do is provide professional development for teachers by teachers. And so I'm really pleased to introduce Diane Mora to you, who's going to really lead our show today. So Diane, take it away.
Well, thanks, Katie. So welcome, everybody. Full disclosure, before I get started, I just had a procedure on my right eye last week. And so if you see me kind of squinting at you or looking a little squinty, just know that it's just me right now. But welcome, and I'm really happy that everyone has decided to join us on this gray day in Kansas City. So in today's session, I'm going to invite you to think about the reasons and ways to prepare students who are English language learners and how to approach timed writing assessments with confidence and evidence of growth without overtaxing the amount of time you spend grading mountains of daily writing. That probably sounds too good to be true, but with the help of my producers, Katie Klein, Julie Shearman, Katie McKay as like a guest co-director from the National Writing Project. I'm pretty nervous. And of course, Cami Goucher's warm welcome to us. I invite you to journey with me through this idea. We have a tradition here with the Greater Kansas City Writing Project to always mention a book that we're currently reading. So if you haven't read The Devil's Highway by Luis Alberto Urrea, I highly recommend it. It's based on a tragic event, though, that happened in May of 2001 when 24 Mexican men attempted to cross the border into Arizona. Only 12 of the 26 survived, and they ended up in intensive care. Their stories, though, helped put one of the most notorious coyotes behind bars. And I have to tell you, it is mesmerizing. It's investigative journalism, it's poetry, it's memoir, and it will put a very humanistic spin on the problems that we see with folks trying to cross. So as we turn directly to our topic of today's session, Gallagher and Kittle are two of the most prominent authorities in teaching reading and writing. And since I claimed that we would improve timed writing outcomes through daily writing that are largely ungraded writings, I'd enjoy knowing your response to this philosophy. Students need a volume of ungraded practice. How do you feel about that? Does that trigger anything for you? And if it does, feel free to drop something into chat or let one of my producers know that you've got something important to say about this. And we'll see what happens. How do you feel about that? Students need a volume of ungraded practice.
So Diane, we have some comments coming up of completely agree definitely, that it lowers stress, provides freedom to write. And it feels true, but tough to manage. Writing is cathartic and a coping strategy. I think students can be intimidated to make their writing perfect when they know it's being evaluated. And someone asked the question, why grade practice?
I love that question. Actually, whoever that was, remind me to send you your $20 for putting me right into the zone that I want to be in to talk to you today. I also appreciated the person who said something about how it's tough to manage if you've got ungraded practice, but right, what do you do with all of that? So let's take a look at this session, because we're going to very closely examine this value of ungraded timed response so that we really improve all these outcomes. But before we actually dive into it, I'm going to have you do a little bit of writing. So using full sentences, I invite you to introduce yourself in chat using your name, your place of birth, and your favorite flavor of ice cream. But before you start writing, you may not use any words containing the letter N, R, or S. So you're gonna have to think about saying, you know, my name is, because name has the letter N. So it's not just where it appears at the first of a word, anywhere in the word. If it has the letter N, R, or S, you can't use it. So I think my co-producer is going to put a minute on the clock, and I'm going to invite you with a minute on the clock to see if you can introduce yourself with these parameters, limitations on the language. Good luck. Okay, I'm starting to see a few very interesting responses.
So Diane, some really great responses. I'm seeing a couple of slips. It's a hard task you gave us.
Yes, I see some letter N's appearing, and that would not be acceptable, would it, Katie? Oh, I see S. I see the letter S in here too. Well, thank you all for playing along with that. there's a real reason behind this, and that's to get us thinking about the experience of ELs in the writing classroom. Because when we have a restriction on the language, it's not that we don't always know what we want to say, it's that we just simply, in many cases, are kind of prohibited from saying it. So now this would have been my response. People call me Dee Dee, and my granddaughter does call me Dee Dee. I became a baby at a medical place with the help of a doc and my mom. My ideal food may be cold chocolate chip milk made with ice. Now, full disclosure, it took me about 8 to 12 minutes to write that, because remember, I did say I wanted full sentences. So again, not something I could have done within a minute, and definitely took me a while to think about and, you know, redesign my vocabulary. I couldn't even really use my full name, which is Diane, because it had an N in it. So I had to change my name. So I'm curious about you. What kind of things did you notice? Did you change or alter your name in order to complete the task? Were you forced to use alternate vocabulary words to complete it because you couldn't rely on common words you commonly know? And how did this exercise affect your ability to construct complete sentences? What do you think, Katie? Folks can unmute for a bit if they have something to say, or drop things into chat, or both.
Yes, both would be great. So you can respond in chat, or if anybody wants to unmute and talk about their experience, that'd be great.
You know, I often also think about how even the words that we use in the instructions and the prompts for writing prompts, a lot of times they may be out of the realm of the vocabulary for some students. And so, you know, that's why we see our topics sometimes they're off topic in their response.
I found that I had to keep going back to the rules. I had to look back at the rules every time I was going to write something. And so it really disrupted my fluency of trying to get something down.
That's a great point, Katie McKay. Thank you so much. You know, I think sometimes we think students are self-distracting maybe with their devices by trying to look up words during class time or what have you. And, you know, they really kind of need that support to go back, look at the rules. How does that compare to what I want to say? Great point.
We had somebody respond, and I think a few comments similar. Jade said, I had to strain to think of synonyms. I felt the restrictions of my own vocabulary.
Yes, very much so. I think that we have the luxury, right, of knowing we have a much bigger vocabulary because we've been using English much longer. And so we at least even have that privilege, if you want to call it in those terms, to look at alternative words. I noticed somebody said something about how they had to eliminate some of their choices, and I think that's what most folks experienced. My name and town didn't fit within the parameters. You know, it's interesting historically. My father is Mexican, and growing up in the United States, the school where he attended, elementary school, would not allow him to be called Dario. Teachers, everybody had a problem with it. So from the time he enrolled in school, his name was David. And so, yeah, we used to see, unfortunately, circumstances like that, where if your name didn't fit the parameters, it became something else. Well, thank you all for contributing to that little exercise. Full disclosure, I just want you to know that I'm sharing what I'm going to share with you today comes directly from my sheltered ELA classes when I was teaching for Kansas City Public Schools. And for those of you who may not know, but most of you probably do, that a sheltered ELA class, I follow the curriculum, the state standards for ELA, for secondary ELA, but my classrooms themselves are a mixed grade level, 9 through 12, we had about 53 different languages in the building at the time. And so I would usually have about 12 languages in the classroom. Most of my students had been in the US 2 years. And of course, a large percentage of SLIFE, students with limited or interrupted formal education, scoring somewhere on the WIDA scale, about a 1.5. If I had a 3, they were very unusual, but somewhere in that range in writing, in the writing domain. Now, I don't expect you to be trying to get out your magnifying glass and see what is it she's trying to tell us here. It's just a snapshot so that you know that my experience of enrolling in a writing project Summer Institute taught me the value of conducting my own classroom level action research. And in this, the reason I'm showing you this image is that I'm comparing the WIDA expectations for growth in writing on the left versus the district's expectations for growth in writing on the right. Now, ELs are consistently disadvantaged by text-heavy writing prompts that are written for English dominant students. And so in GLE and EOC assessments they're all steeped in this unfamiliar cultural reference. They lack visual support for the most part, and they're very dense prompts to read. And the WIDA assessments provide images, models of writing expectations. So as I looked at, what are the expectations, the outcomes for expectations, I realized on the left here with the WIDA that my students in my classroom were entering my classroom down here on the left in this gold and orange area, which would be a level 1 and level 2. But that in order to perform on grade level, which is on the right, the red box that I've outlined, they would actually have to be performing at a minimum of a level, 4, which is that green on the box on the left for the WIDA. So, it's a big leap, right? To think that in 1 year, we're gonna get kids writing at a 1.5 up to no less than a 4 in order to be on grade level. So this made me start thinking, well, how am I going to do this? I also started looking at how timed assessments were structured and what they focused on. And most of you will recognize that this checklist appears at the end of the WIDA annual writing assessments. And oddly enough, in the next slide, you'll see that it's almost the identical checklist that we see like in the MOLE writer's checklist. And so what I did was, in the next slide, you'll see that I decided, well, I can't cover all of these things every day, but the things that are similar, can you write a beginning, middle, and end? Does it stay on topic? Does it have relevant details? It might blend genre, and if it does, that's great. Can it integrate materials from sources? If I could at least focus on these 5 that were common across the 2, how might that improve my students' ability to write on demand in timed assessments? And to me, daily writing is about overcoming the fear of writing and building stamina and confidence. I know it's still important that we talk about spelling, grammar, and mechanics, but for me in my classroom, those are the things that I look at deeply when we look at project-based writing. So more than anything, as we continue to talk about this idea of ungraded writing, I'm not talking about unplanned, unstructured, or unaccounted for. In fact, quite the opposite is true. When we think about, next slide, please. When we think about how to prove my point on this, I'm going to rely on Grant Wiggins' 3 stages of backward design. And in the next slide, you'll see that where I've decided to start is with this idea that ungraded doesn't mean I haven't identified a desired outcome. Actually, I identify my own goals as a teacher first, and I articulate those expectations in student-friendly, accessible terms. before I do anything else. My desired outcome as a teacher is to push my student language development right up toward exit status out of ELD services, and to push them to at least grade level, if not beyond, for ELA. However, it's just as important to make sure that students understand why our daily writing practice is instrumental to their academic growth. Now, you'll probably notice that this slide looks a little different in the colors and setups. This is a slide that I've actually pulled out of the slides that I use in my classrooms. And I'm doing this just so that you see that I'm really authentic about and intentional in my own classroom practice, to make sure that students understand that we journal as much for our academic growth as we do for maybe the ways that we want to see ourselves in the future as bloggers or journalists or playwrights or songwriters or even marketing executives. In the next slide, you'll see that I also go back to our journals on occasion, and so that students get in the habit of seeing that we journal as a way to brainstorm ideas for future essays. In this example, I would have been talking to my students about saying, you know, last week in our journal, we wrote this list of songs, and this week we're going to take this organizer in order to create this 6-part essay about, you know, why do you like the lyrics of this one song? Where does your love of music come from? And why do you even listen to music? How does it make you feel? So again, always reinforcing. And then much more than anything, you know, writing affects every part of our lives. And especially as we are seeing this wonderful explosion of writers across all different backgrounds and cultural experiences, there may very well come a time where students need to dominate the writing that they're doing so that they can express themselves in a way that truly reflects their personal experience. So as we move to this second stage of Wiggins backwards design, we have to address the sticky wicket of what is acceptable evidence that students are developing toward. I mean, we can define increased WIDA access scores and improve ELA assessment, but how do I prove that they're making that progress if I'm not grading that writing? So I'm going to let you answer that question first. Based on what I've defined as my desired result, what would you recommend I use as acceptable evidence that my students' ungraded writing is having a positive impact on the development of their writing? What is acceptable evidence if I'm not grading it? Or how do I use some evidence? And I think if you're somebody who just prefers to unmute and spout it out, you're welcome to do that too. My screen is somewhat frozen, Katie, so I'm not able to really monitor chat.
Yeah, it's just starting to come in. So some ideas could be maybe a self-check or peer review. Perhaps using rubrics or checklists. Someone says you still give feedback. You pick an area to work on growing and have students set their own goals and have them score themselves to monitor their own growth. Volume, variety, and thoughtfulness.
Those are some from a rubric that I've used before for notebooks that, you know, just that they're producing a lot, that there's a variety of their, instead of the same entry every single time or filling a page with I'm so, you know, tired, just the way but it seems, yeah, that the kids can, keeping it basic like you did with when you were talking earlier, Dan, about the desired results.
Yeah, thanks for that, Katie. I should mention here while we're watching some of the responses come in that Katie McKay is an expert in probably all grade levels of of English language development, where most of my experience is in the secondary level. And so Katie's got great ideas for those of you who are joining us at the elementary level.
Diane, a couple more comments. We have quality and quantity patterns for future teaching and learning, consistent and earnest engagement with the practice. And as Cami says, the fact that they are writing, students evaluating their own.
Excellent. So these are great ideas. I wish I would have, consulted all of you before struggling on my own to come to some of my own conclusions. So I appreciate those ideas. And now I guess the big reveal is actually quite a few of those came into play for me too. So I always begin with being very explicit about how to journal. And even though I'm explicit, it still makes room for student choice within the framework of the expectations. So here you see another slide directly from my classroom. Actually, if you go back just real quick, that if you look at number 4, that really gives them the freedom and liberty to say, if you really don't want to write about this today, here's what you can start with and what you can write about. So I think that's always just a great way that kids know they always have something to say. Now, I'm also intentional about letting folks know that, some days we are going to read out loud. So think, if you're really writing something private, and other days, it's whatever. And even though I use this word graded with my students to let them know that their students are graded once a month, I do let them know that they're not graded for perfect spelling or perfect grammar. And really, you're going to see here in a minute with my rubric that it's kind of a loose interpretation of what I'm grading. So this is an example of the rubric that I've designed for my use. After today's presentation, when you have access to the slides, you'll see down here in the left corner that you can click on a link. And if you want to examine my rubric more closely, or you want to try to use it or change it around, you're welcome to. But I designed this rubric so that I could review it with my students so that they understood the expectations and the framework for journaling. Now, each student has a personalized copy of this rubric, and they tape it inside the front cover of their journal. And each time I review it, I just write the date in the corresponding performance category across the top. And then it's not unusual that we see that students will fluctuate in how they're meeting these expectations of the 6 expectations along the left. But by dating each category each time, students and I can see which direction ultimately that they're progressing. And at least once a semester, I try for twice a semester, I actually just meet with each student specifically about their journal so that we can talk about what's happening in their writing. Now, I also, I've referred to a daily writing goal, and you might be curious about what that is. And briefly, I think it's important, and I think somebody mentioned this in chat, that it's important to give students the autonomy to set and track their own goals. So this writing goal for my purposes in the journal is really a numerical goal of how many words they will strive to write each day during our 4 minutes of writing time. And they actually calculate that and they track it inside their journal. And it kind of becomes an opportunity for us to, to just talk about a goal, right? Now, they monitor their progress. And what you're looking at here, though, is students also have a writing portfolio. And that would track their daily writing goals, but also their long-term projects. And these writing portfolios are super important for me for doing my one-to-one conferencing with students, but I whip them out at parent conferences. They're helpful when talking about writing performance with content teachers, because I think sometimes content teachers forget that if it's a bell ringer or a quick write or even an exit ticket, that sometimes without an image or some type of a sentence stem, our ELs spend a lot of energy just trying to get started because they're still trying to interpret what's being asked of them. So this would be an example from my classroom writer's journal, because I always write alongside my students. And you can see that I track myself too. In this entry, I wrote 118 words. And yes, every period I would write with my students. And I almost always read out loud because I think it's an opportunity for them to see that not everything I write is publishable or publication worthy, like right on this spot. And I would also add here that my personal preference is that we begin the school year in paper journals or composition notebooks, but then in January, which is the start of the second semester, we all start fresh, but in digital journals. And these would be just two examples of student digital journals. I always have the framework that I give them, but they personalize that framework. And I find that them having a template really makes them it makes it more efficient for me when I'm evaluating these entries. Because everything's organized the same way. But again, they have this ability to personalize them. And this is an even more refined iteration of the digital journals as my proficiency with Google Docs over time improved. And you can see here that I changed the framework that students will follow. If you're not familiar with the table of contents tool in Google Docs, oh my gosh, game changer. Because as you can see here on the left in Eddie's journal, it quickly allows me to scan the date, the word count, and it hot links me directly to a specific entry within his journal if I want to look at that one. So here, Eddie's entry for May 8th would have appeared in the body of his digital journal. And by May 8th, we're nearing the end of the year. And this is a quote from Eddie's reflection on what it meant to him to keep a journal all year. And he says, what I like the most about journals is how you get random words and we write about them, right? And that's when I really challenge myself to write as much as I can. Well, thinking about Eddie here, I'm just curious, we're at the midpoint of this backward design. And before I let you in on what it is that Eddie's so excited about, I'm curious if any of you have questions, comments, concerns, or you're just like, no, keep going. What is it that Eddie is so excited about?
I think we're all just waiting for the big reveal.
Yeah.
Cora does say she loves the motivation that students are able to express through setting and reaching their own defined goals. And she loves that there's a language foundation for writing. And then Peggy asks what resources you provide for vocabulary besides sentence frames.
Well, Peggy, I'm so glad you asked that because that's actually what's coming up. So I'm going to jump right to it, which brings us to planning, how I plan and plan these learning experiences and these instructions. This is the how, right? So let's get to it. Remember, Eddie said that what he liked most was this random word thing. Well, what is that? Random words is something we did every Friday in my classroom, and you're going to get to play it too. So random word is Actually, I can't take full credit for this as much as I would like to, but when I completed my first National Writing Project Summer Institute, one of my wonderful cohort members introduced us to two super fun writing practices. One was called power writing on the left, and the other one was called random words. And I've put these two ideas together and adjusted the timing for ELs, and this is what you end up with. Random Word Fridays. So if you would, I'm going to invite you to think about this vocabulary. We have two randomly generated words here. I actually use an app called Random Word Generator, and it spits out two words, and I give students 4 minutes of time to write. But since you're all very strong English dominant individuals, I am going to only give you 1 minute, and we're going to play random word. So you get two words, and you have to use both words within a story, but you can't start writing yet until we say go. Now, in terms of vocabulary development, I don't know about you, but most of my, certainly my newcomers would struggle. So could I get my vocabulary supports here for you? There you go. Now, we could think about wardrobe in terms of our clothing. We could think about wardrobe in terms of our overall fashion sense. But did you remember that a wardrobe could also be furniture? And what about the word tablet? If you're as old as I am, you might forget that a tablet could be a device. It could be your medicine. Or if you're really as old as I am, a tablet could be paper, something that you write on. So your task in the next minute when we say start is to use both of these words. Doesn't matter if it's fiction, poetry, whatever it is, nonfiction, doesn't matter. You have to use both words though in the same concept of what you're writing about. So when we say stop, you have to put your pencil down or stop typing. Everybody's ready and go. Use wardrobe and tablet within the same writing. All right, pencils down or fingers off the keyboard. And if you would, some of you are dropping your stories into chat, which is amazing. Yay. And if you're not somebody who wants to put your story in chat, then at least count the number of words you wrote and tell us how many words you wrote. And those of you who were in chat, I don't know if you have a way to count, but yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to read because these are really, really interesting. But most important is if you can get a count of your words somehow and keep that and circle it. And you'll see why here in just a second. Katie, whenever you feel like we're ready, just let me know, or Julie, whoever advancing slides. Oh, I guess we want to celebrate, yeah, with how many words people were able to capture.
Do you want us to drop the number in the chat before we advance, Diane?
Yes, please. I think that will be great. 56 or so, 74. Katie McKay. Did she cheat? All right. These are all great reasons, great numbers to celebrate, right? And this is an important part of random words. All right. I see lots of 30s, 40s. Okay. Now, the thing about Random Word Fridays is you don't just do it once. We're going to do this again. So this is round 2. I've already gone out to the computer, to the app, and our next 2 words are frock and sunglasses. I'm not going to give you the visuals this time because I think you got the idea, but get ready to write. The main objective here is that you count and use frock and sunglasses. Go. You might go back so that they can remember the words for in case somebody forgets. Thanks. Oh, all right. Pencils down or fingers off the keypad. Just count your words and drop those numbers into chat again for us. I'm going to count mine. I'm embarrassed. I only had 27. I got started late. I see a 42. Of course, Sarah 42, Linda Brock 40. Oh, we got a close tie there. Okay. All good numbers. 54, Cora. Nice work. 45 from Cami. 66, Tracy. Holy cow. All right. We're 58 for Renee, a very strong number as well. All right. We have one more round left and then we'll unpack this. Oh, research and rank. So Katie Klein, whenever you're ready to start the clock for us. Research and rank. You might go back so we can, there you go. Thanks. Oh, time's up. Okay, count your words, please, and drop that number into chat. Oh yeah, 49, 50, Cami again, 42, Sarah. So as these numbers come in, lots of numbers to celebrate. And what I'm going to ask you to do now is, did anyone's word count increase by round 3? And if it did, let us know. You can unmute and say, yeah, mine increased by round 3, or you can drop it into chat, but I'm curious, what happened? I was pushing to make my count increase. Katie Klein, you want to say more about that?
Well, I think you know, Diane, I'm a competitive person and I saw a lot of higher numbers than mine. And so I was really trying to not think as much as I was writing and just like trying really to think about writing fast.
Cool.
That's funny, Katie, because I am not competitive. And I wonder if that's why mine went down, because of nerves, or I don't know. I'm like the opposite. I'm like, I don't want to race.
Well, in the classroom anyway, I would always put my number up on the board, and students really loved that challenge of thinking they could outright Miss Mora. And honestly, by the end of the first quarter, throughout the rest of the year, there were quite a few times where I got bested, which is always a good thing, right? When our students do better. So yeah, there's lots of interesting things going on in chat that I don't always have time to go back and look at. But if somebody sees something there they want to comment on, please feel free. So one of the ways that we even expand on Random Word Fridays that really gets this whole idea of power writing going is we do open mic on Fridays as well. And so what happens is after 3 rounds of writing, students read what they think is their best of the 3 to a shoulder partner. And then I will accept up to 5 students to either self-nominate, or they can be nominated by a classmate to read their best entry at the open mic. When they step up to the mic, they have to follow, or I shouldn't say have to, they're encouraged to follow the writer's protocol of like, I'm Eddie and I'm a writer. And then we all always respond with thanks for sharing. Now we do vote on the best use of the pair of random words, and that's counted by the loudness of the crowd response. And then obviously there are also usually times to talk about how we use these paired words similarly or differently. I don't know how we're doing on time today, but if anybody wants to step up to the mic and we have time, I'd love to hear some of the stories.
And did I hear you right that sometimes other students can nominate somebody, Diane?
Yeah, so when they're reading to their shoulder, like everybody has to pick a shoulder partner to read at least one entry to. And from that shoulder partner reading, if you think the story that you just heard was super phenomenal, you can nominate that person up to the mic. Or yes, students can just volunteer themselves to come up.
Because I don't know if everybody had a chance to read Tracy's rank piece, but I think it would, I would love it if she would share it.
I missed it, so I'd love to hear it.
What, do you just want me to read it?
Yes, please. Now, which 2 words are you highlighting so that we can listen for
rank and research.
Right.
The junior high teacher decided to research the use of Axe body spray by students in grades 7 through 9. As a teacher, he knew that students were smelling rank and then spraying Axe to cover it up. He intended to research the use of body sprays rather than showering and see how often it occurred. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Based on my own background knowledge as a junior high teacher for multiple years before I moved down to the elementary. So
I think those of us who are secondary teachers have all had our encounters with, yeah, acts. Terrific. Well, if you think we have time, I'm open for another reader if there is one. All right. Well, something to think about is, right, how you used, ranked, and researched differently in your own writing. And that opens up a whole nother way to talk about words and vocabulary in the classroom. Now, there really are just these 3 steps to getting the Random Word Friday going, or Random Word Day. And you just need the Random Word Generator website, which I think someone's going to drop in chat for us. The link directly to that. Again, I found that the sweet spot with English language learners is that this 4 minutes, it seemed like anything less than that, and they just really had trouble getting complete thoughts down. And if I went longer than 4 minutes, it just, I don't know, it just didn't work. It was too much time. And then, of course, adding their word counts and this idea of open mic, you might not get to it every single time, but trust me, the days that you do, kids really start grooving on it. So as we are here at the end of our time today, I just wanted to share another book that I'm currently reading, and it's called The Anti-Racist Writing Workshop, How to Decolonize the Creative Classroom by Felicia Rose Chavez. I love this quote, and I hope you'll indulge me in just for a moment while I actually read the whole thing, because seriously, if I could have written something about what I believe about writing, it would have been this. As a rule of practice, I do not begin workshop with model texts that instruct participants in how to write a story, poem, scene, or essay. Instead, we just write and vent and risk take and confess our fears and riff off one another. And most of all, wander. When that freedom to put words on page shifts from panic to habit, students' pens fly during free writes. They stand taller when reading their work aloud. They stop apologizing so much, and they don't come to me as often with fears of doing it wrong. That's when I know that we're ready to move on to a study of craft. It's important that my students demonstrate confidence first and technical proficiency second. So by implementing routines that like Random Word Fridays and others that I've turned into writing practices, I've consistently had students score higher in writing on the WIDA assessment than in any other domain. I've also had EL students outperform English dominant students on grade level writing assessments. So Random Word Fridays and the daily journal writing, they may be largely ungraded, but these timed writing routines are not unplanned, they are not unstructured, and they are not unaccounted for. So here we are. I don't know if your thoughts about how students need a volume of ungraded practice have changed or not, but if you have anything else you'd like to add to what we've looked at today, we'd be happy to hear about it. So looking here. Really loved that so many of you participated in chat today and writing. And I appreciate that you stuck with us to examine all this ungraded writing and supporting our English language learners. So thanks for being here today. I know Cammie's got a few things to talk about. Those are my influencers and references. And you can always find me at dianemariemora@gmail.com. thanks for being with me today, and happy writing.
Thank you so much, Diane. That was wonderful. I'm going to leave it open for a little bit if anyone has questions they'd like to ask or comments they'd like to make, and you're welcome to unmute and chime in. I'll give you a few minutes if you'd like to ask questions or make comments.
I have a question, Diane. You mentioned earlier that you start off the year using like composition notebooks and then sort of switch gears to digital journals. Do you notice a difference in how students are engaging?
That's a great question, Nicole. Thanks for asking. I do see a difference. Some students totally flip in either direction. Some flip from just not really being into the writing on paper. I think a lot of that, but then when they go into the digital space, they're like, right? And then I see students who do the opposite. They just, and I think that really, honestly, some of that comes down to, if you're a student who grew up writing in Arabic, let's say on paper, which is written from right to left instead of left to right, that writing process on paper, just even that can throw you for a loop. But then again, you might be a student whose access to a Chromebook or a device, not all keypads are the same around the world. And so you may suddenly be faced with using one finger to hunt and peck because, let's face it, you and I probably know why our alphabet is arranged the way it is on a keypad, but it's not ABC order. And I think if you're learning the language, you're suddenly like, wait a minute, where's A, B, C, D, right? It just doesn't compute. So I've actually seen it go both ways. Great question. Well, thanks again for having me today, Cami. It was great to see you and know that you're still doing all this great work.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We are going to take a few minutes and look at our WIDA framework where we left off. A quick overview of the next section. And you're welcome to stay and join us if you'd like. We're kind of unpacking our new standards. So I'm going to share my screen again. There we go. So the last time we were together, we looked at just an overview, the big picture of our standards, and we talked about how they changed. Instead of the communicate for or of, the way we communicate math, they've changed it to the word for. So that was only real change in our 5 standards that we have. We're going to move on to looking at today, I'm trying to go real quick through this, the key language uses, including your general ed classes, explaining how to identify the key language uses and those uses in the classroom. And our big question here is, what do the key languages usage look like in your classroom or your subject area? Again, these are the 6 things we're looking at. We looked at the big ideas last time: equity, integration, collaboration, and the functional approach. And then today we're going to look at these key uses. Next time we'll start looking at some grade level clusters. So I'm going to skip through that. Key language uses are in section 2 of the new standards if you want to find them. It's the second part of the framework. So we talked about the ELD standard statements and now the key language uses. Then the next would be the language expectations and then those proficiency level descriptors. And you can find those starting on page 23, put those links in there. And then we talked last time about this funnel down. So we start with our standard and then we identify the key language use, and then it funnels down until we get to those language features that we're going to focus on. Let's get that. So here's a little warm-up activity, kind of going with what we're talking about today. So if you have ever been to the Grand Canyon, or you know anything about the Grand Canyon, think about orally how you would write a postcard to your friend explaining what you saw. Can someone unmute and tell me, what would you say to a friend if you saw the Grand Canyon? Just jump in there. Nobody wants to talk.
Well, Cami, I think we normally say, wish you were here, having a great time, beautiful weather, marvelous place. You're real informal.
Okay. So if you're going to write a travel brochure and tell me 5 facts about the Grand Canyon, what kind of things would you say then? Would it be different? You probably tell me things like how large it is and maybe the different areas you could visit. And then the third thing says orally write a sign about how the Grand Canyons were formed. So that would be more detailed, like you talk about how the river ran through it and carved it out over time. And this fourth one says orally write a letter to the governor of Arizona advocating for or against installing a cable car system in the Grand Canyon. So you would have to, what kind of speech would you use if you were writing that letter? It wouldn't be the same as that postcard. You'd be more doing what kind of speaking? You guys are quiet now. You'd probably do kind of like debating or arguing for a cause or something like that. And that brings us to our 4 key uses. These have changed, so they're not the same as in the past. So our 4 key language uses are narrate, inform, explain, and argue. So for the first one, when you're writing that postcard, you're probably going to be narrating, you're telling a story. And then the second one that we talked about, you're informing, giving that general information on a topic. Then they explain, you're telling how things work or why something happened. And then that last one, you're arguing or developing a claim or providing convincing evidence for a cause. So those are what our 4 key language uses have changed to. And they've done this because they believe that these are more overarching and go into all content areas. So let's see, oh, now my screen's not going to change again. Let's see here. There we go. So narrate. This again, you're writing about what you saw, a lived experience. And the inform, you're listing those key facts. Explain mostly how and why. Might use those words like first, second, third. And then argue, you're trying to persuade somebody to do something. The thing about our key language uses, they are high leverage practices. They're good for alignment in your classroom, and they're found in all content areas, but they're more common in ELA, math, science, and social studies. For high leverage, we can talk about the genres that genre families. The key language uses reflect most high leverage genre families across the academic content standards. And again, they're narrate, inform, explain, and argue. The neat thing about our new standards framework is for each grade level, they tell you which key language uses are most prominent. And they'll give you this chart for each grade level that tells you for the language of social instructional purposes, they use all 4. And this would be in kindergarten. In ELA, they use mostly narrate and inform, and some argue. In mathematics, they're going to be using inform, some explain, and some argue. In science, inform, explain, and a little bit of argument. And in social studies, they're a little narrate, inform, and a little bit of argument. So for each grade level, it gives you this chart that tells you which key language uses are most prominent. And those are found on, pages 288 to 290. And the nice thing about these is they all overlap. No one is pulled out and alone on itself by itself. They all work together. So that you could have all 4 in one lesson. You might have 2 in one lesson. So they build upon each other. And each one has its own unique features. And it talks about those on pages 222 to 233. It gives you a breakdown of what each one looks like. And it explains and goes into more in depth of what each key language use might look like in your classroom. I'm going to skip over that. But I have an activity, I don't think we're going to do that, but I'm inviting you to click on the link that I'm going to give you when I put this out and see if you can sort these yourself into the 4 language uses. So there are different statements here, and see if you can organize them. You can go and look at what other people have done. Again, there's no right answer, kind of like our sort last time. Just wanted to provide that to you. There is a solution that again, there's no one right answer, but this gives you an idea of what the experts, how they organize them. So how would you explain and model the key language uses in a workshop or in your classroom? That's your reflection. And like last time, I'd like for you to make a commitment on how you would try to use the key language uses in the future, learning more about implementing it into your practice, excuse me, or explaining it to others. And there will be a link for you to go in and make that commitment. So next session, as I said, we'll dive into a little bit of the different grade levels and standards, and look at how they're used and give you a better picture of what it looks like. So follow up on your commitment, review the key language uses in section 2, and then start looking at the grade level clusters. That's your assignment. And then if you have any questions or need any assistance, our male representatives are always there to help you, and give any of them a call or email, and they're happy to hook up with you. And then that is it for today. Nothing really big to report on the national level or federal government level. Nothing new has really changed in the last month. So look back at our note taker, and I will be including the slides from Julie and our friends from the Missouri Writing Network. And those will be available later today along with the recording. Thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you next month. That was a lot in a short amount of time. Always a pleasure to have you guys here. Thank you.